David, I think we'll kick off now.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Kuldip Sandhu, and I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar session this afternoon in hot, sweaty UK. It's a very warm afternoon, so I hope you've all got your water and you're all safe and well. This afternoon's webinar session is entitled IT Transformation for an Enhanced End User and Customer Experience. I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague and partner, David D. Agostino, and from NextThink. And we are really looking forward to our interactive session and to share some of our thoughts and views on the topic. Just a few bits of admin before we run into the content that we've pulled together for you and some of the insights that we're going to provide you on. So the format of the agenda is I will introduce myself and David will do as well. We are intending the presentation to last about 40 minutes and then we'll go into our discussion and Q&A session. We would really encourage everybody to post up questions in this chat function in Zoom, and David and I myself will be monitoring that to see what questions come through, and we'll try to answer those to the fullest when we get to that section. Please do that as you go along. The actual presentation is going to be split into 6 sections. The first section is I'm going to be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on the IT function, its staff and professionals, and a particular focus on the spend, or the lack of, in some cases, the lack of spend in IT that's going to come as we go into the kind of IT recovery phase post the COVID pandemic era. And then I'm going to kind of introduce everybody to the IT maturity model, which I have presented in the past, but I think it's very relevant for the IT transformation journey and some of the benefits that you can realize in the new norm that everybody talks about. And for those people who have a strong bias towards the people side of change, I'm going to be talking about some of the organizational change lessons we've learned as an organization as we've helped IT departments for their transformation journey. And that will act as a great segue to David, who's going to be talking about how to measure, monitor, and enhance the end user and IT experience using the NextThink platform. And he's got some great use cases to show us. He'll hand back to me around some of the key takeaways, and we'll get into Q&A. So here we go. So this is me. I'm Kuldip Sandhu. I'm the Managing Director of Innovative Quality Solutions, and we're a digital agency that sits at the intersection between business and IT. And what we do is we help organizations transform their IT function to ensure that they can get aligned to the business agenda, which typically nowadays is all about digital transformation. As you can see, I've worked in management consultancy for about 10 years, in industry for about 15 years. I've worked as an interim executive, and over the last couple of years, I had the pleasure of transforming the IT function at the Excel Convention Centre, where I was helping them become a smart venue. And you can see the plethora of clients that I've worked at in the past. Without further ado, David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Kuldip. So yeah, name's David D'Agostino, as you can see here. It's not diagnostic, so I'm not being included as part of the an aftercare package with the presentation or anything. Like Kuldip, I've been knocking around in the IT industry, and kind of specifically, I guess, the IT service management industry for years, having joined Peregrine Systems back in 1991 when it was still a green screen platform, and ITIL was still at version 1. What I've found in my time, both at organizations like Peregrine and Hewlett Packard, where I was part of the product management team for HP Service Manager, and then onward to 9 years at ServiceNow, is that the industry has been very focused on managing the technology and managing SLAs in line with what IT can get its arms around, I guess, which is kind of closer to the data center. And you know, the reason I came to NextThink is because it's really turned that whole paradigm on its head, and it really helps us to look at services, the quality of those services and how they're consumed from the point of view of the business consumers, who after all are the people who are paying for all of this and the people that the services have been built for. And we'll take a look at that after we've been through some context. Back to you, Kuldeep.
Thank you, David. So I'm going to set some context. I think the world has truly changed based on COVID-19, but even before pre-COVID-19, there was significant change going on, especially from a technology perspective. And as you can see on this slide on the left-hand side, there's a little diagram that shows the kind of technology adoption. For example, the aircraft, to get to 50 million users, it took 68 years. To get to 50 million users of Twitter, it took 2 years. And lo and behold, to get to 50 million users of the children's Pokemon Go game, it took 19 days. And that really does show you the pace of technology adoption pre-COVID. But I think the pandemic has forced IT departments to quickly, in an agile way, to adopt technology, especially around remote working and collaboration tools. And that acceleration has been ongoing for some time. On the right-hand side, I wanted to show you Martech's law, which shows that technology adoption, all that technology change, increasing at an exponential rate. But what we do in organizations is we only change at a logarithmic way, which is a lot slower than the fast pace with technology. And what we find is that organizations need to really reset that gap between technology change and the organizational change. And some of the key things that we've unearthed as we've been helping organizations around digital, IT and agile transformation is the 6 pillars, 6 steps. One, making sure that there's good organizational design, which is all about ensuring the right skills and capabilities in place and the values that are derived from the business and digital strategy. And then those values then get imbibed in the organizational culture for that organization to thrive. There's a compelling need to get people engaged in the workforce. And there's plenty of research out there that shows that there's very low people engagement. This is where we need good management and leadership with vision, direction, and a compelling offering to its staff to get them bought into the company vision, and also then using making sure that the ways of working are well kind of adopted across the organization. And what I mean by that is having good, well-oiled processes, good DevOps type cultures of innovation, places of safety for people to develop their skills, grow, and then as all the organizations, you need some level of governance and funding that supports the culture so that products and services are delivered in a better way. I think over the last 5 months, one of the things I've realized as I've been talking to CIOs is IT departments have really had the light shone on them, and they've really excelled in moving their workforce to work remotely. And I coined it the digital workplace for transformation. And it was done in a very agile way where they looked at a minimal viable product and then they adapted it and brought about that change in a very rapid way. So that's put IT into a good place. But as I've been talking to many people over a number of webinars, there's a whole bunch of things that are now emerging that IT departments need to kind of embrace. I think one of the things is going to be the need to ensure that prudent and investments in technology are made. And I think business cases are going to be focused on around efficiency gains. As you can see on the right-hand side in this slide, this is a survey that was done in just in April this year, just after the pandemic had hit the UK, which was CIOs and IT leaders are saying, where do you think the spend is going to happen? And as you can see, cybersecurity, RPA, smart analytics, our multi-cloud strategy, AI, and some more of the innovation things around 5G, IoT are going to have some increased spend, and there's going to be some reduction in spend. And I think CFOs, CEOs are going to demand more for less from technology. So that really requires the IT department and the IT leadership to be totally working in lockstep with the business leaders, to be aligned to ensuring that they are working on the key projects and the key technology initiatives that are going to give you value to the business. And that business IT alignment is going to be important, whilst driving innovation and bringing in agility in IT service delivery. And as I said before, there's a golden opportunity for IT to rise to the occasion, to enable use IT as a way to enhance or bring about that digital transformation. But I think there's always a need to have a framework for how you go about transforming the IT department. And in my last webinar, I introduced the IT maturity model, which you can see here. The IT, excuse me, the IT maturity model has a number of dimensions. It has strategy, structure, process, people, technology, which includes systems and infrastructure and data. Those key dimensions need to be all working in tandem as you go on the IT transformation journey. And this model shows that maturity journey from being kind of basic to getting operationally focused to standardizing, acting, and then bringing value to the business, and then totally being aligned with the business needs. And as you go through this consolidation, rationalization, optimization, you then get into a place of agility. And agility means that you have resilience and you're able to respond to the changing needs of the business who's responding to the changing needs in the marketplace. And that's what agility is really, really important. And this framework allows IT departments to understand where they are, their current state, which I've shown in red arrow, and actually determine where their future state is. And that gap between current and future state actually becomes your roadmap for change and transformation. And in my next webinar, which will be in about 2 to 3 weeks' time, I'm going to be talking about specific things you can do around rationalization, consolidation, optimization. That's for the future, but we're going to now talk about some of the kind of people aspects of change that we've and some of the lessons learned that we have embraced over the years as we've worked on some of these IT transformation initiatives. Some of the benefits that you can go as you go on that maturity journey is you can understand your total cost of ownership, and you can then think about a value-based discussion with the business, reducing risk, being more compliant with audit and any other compliance initiatives in the business, and also optimizing resources to give you value for money and bringing in that IT agility, which therefore embraces business agility as you go up that maturity curve. So to do all this transformation, you need people to go on the journey with you. And some of the things that I want to talk about is the organizational change that aspects of, and the people aspects of IT transformation. What you see here is the standard traditional S-curve for organizational change, and it's very typical to the transformation that I've seen in many IT departments. Usually a new CIO or a new leader comes in, he will bring in a new vision and a new direction. And for some people, that's great. They're really happy because they've been crying out for change because they feel that they've been held back. But in some cases, people become fearful. They see it as a threat. It's something that that's going to replace them, and they can get depressed, and you can end up in that trough of delusionment. But there are various techniques that you can use as you go through the change to bring people out of that trough and get them bought in. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But I wanted to introduce this because we're going to be talking about end users and people, the people aspects of change. So what have we learned as we've gone through change? Some of the things that we've captured is that the S-curve is really geared around having a big bang approach. And the big bang approach is, as I said, that new leader comes in, he brings in some enthusiasm and lots of rigor around change, announces a major transformation. Morale initially goes up, some level of competency goes up, but then people start realizing the magnitude of the change, and they can end up in this trough. And because the tenure of the CIO that I lead, IT lead, is only a couple of years, it's very difficult to come out of that unless you've got the controls and the project controls and management in place to bring about the kind of the increase in morale. What we've learned is the best way to do this is to think about doing it in an incremental improvement way. So bringing in highly visible, highly engaging and risk-free agile change in small chunks. And that's what we've shown in the jagged line there. If you can set the scene and bring about value in an incremental way, that gives you that enhanced morale and competency in a piecemeal way all the way through the transformation journey. Just to expand a little bit more on that, what you can see on this slide on the left-hand side is the change S-curve, where it's a normal distribution. What we typically see is that what I think the lesson that we've learned is that you've got to keep the initial change gradient low and keep the expectations relatively low at the beginning, because if you force the pace of change, it's very difficult for staff and members to unlearn things. And by accelerating that change in initial pace, it's difficult for people to understand new ways of working and actually embrace the change. And what I try to show is on the the graph on the right hand side here, is that what you really need to do is understand who your change agents are, or what I coined here the innovators. These are the people who are your champions in your organization. They're the ones that embrace change very quickly, and they can fuse that across the organization. And they will then, what will follow after that in that scarcity bubble there is the early adopters. And once you get the early adopters, you'll find that the early majority will come on board because they've seen the social proof of the change, because you're bringing on incremental change. And then what you find is that the later majority will follow. And what I've seen work is that you don't focus on the laggards at the beginning. I'm not saying you ignore them at all, but you focus on the change, because once you have the innovators and adopters in the early majority, you find that many of the laggards just come on board. And the S-curve normal distribution is the cumulative distribution is the S-curve normal distribution, if you want to show it. And I think the point that we've seen where change really takes effect is what I put in the dotted line there. If you can cross that chasm from the early adopters into the early majority, you know that the change can be successful. And I can show you, I can tell you, because I've got plenty of scars, that many of our transformation programs have very rarely, in some cases, got through the scarcity point and have failed. And you can there's plenty of research and articles out there in the marketplace that shows that many transformations programs fail because they don't fail to get that majority. And I thought that's important to set that context, because some of the challenges we see is there's people challenges because there's lack of roles, there's lack of transparency, people are not motivated, processes are undefined, they're not repeatable, therefore you can't automate them. Things that we've seen around technology, that there's a wrong set of requirements, the tool features and platforms are not as required for business needs. There's a limited integration, and there's lots of technology debt. And I think what we're saying is that we really need to ensure that the people, process, technology triangle has to be really well honed to ensure you address some of these challenges from a people, process, and technology perspective. How do you go about change? Well, one of the things that you can do is you can do change readiness assessments, where you do a litmus test to understand how or people are feeling about the change, understand their needs. You develop your change network, you develop your change agents, you develop an effective communication plan, you create the organizational awareness, you integrate teams, you coach and mentor those innovators and adopters, you learn from trial and pilots, you from successful pilots, you champion that success. Where things haven't worked, you learn from those failures, but you move on quickly, and then you get the mass adoption, and you continually monitor the change aspects through this change readiness assessment to take that litmus test to adjust your path as you see fit. So who's the owner for the change? For to go on that IT function transformation, and there's lots of technology initiatives that evolve, what I'm trying to bring across is there's a strong people element, and we really need good, strong leaders for the future. And that really sits on the shoulders of the CIO and the IT leadership team. You still, in the pre-COVID world and the post-lockdown, you're still going to have to do a lot of the legacy stuff, moving to the cloud, software as a service, and that can be done by the IT operations team. But I think it's incumbent on the IT leaders to really embrace the agile way of working, agile improvements, bringing people on that journey, providing that leadership and direction, and bringing about those iterative business outcomes. And I think, as I said, the digital workplace and remote working has given IT the momentum to embrace or move forward with that transformation story in a very positive way. So I wanted to now come back to the maturity model, because that's all fine and dandy. We talked about some of the change challenges. We talked about maybe some of the high-level initiatives and the trends. But one of the things is, how do you, as you go on that transformation journey, and how do you embrace the employees? How do you actually ensure you understand what the end user experience is? Because some of my experiences are that we find end users who are silently crying about the poor service that IT typically provides, and they won't address it because they won't raise a ticket or they won't call the service desk. And there's got to be a better way in transformation and in BAU to understand the employee, end user, business consumer of IT services, their experience. And that's why I've asked David to join us today to talk about how the Next Thing platform actually embraces the sentimental experiences of our end users, and then actually can provide proactive actions to enhance that experience. And I'm going to now hand over to David to take us through the platform and some of the use cases to kind of build on the story I've just set the context around.
Thanks very much, Kuldeep. That's a great, I think you just need to unshare me while we're sharing screens and doing all of those technical things. I think it was an interesting point that you made about maturity. You know, in the kind of time that I've kind of worked with IT organisations over the years, it seems that there are always two kind of hills that that IT organisations almost kind of live or die on. You know, one of them is the classic CMDB. You know, kind of can we get there? Can we fill it? Can we keep it up to date? And it just seems over the years to have been one of the great big kind of challenges and talking points. And the other is how to efficiently, you know, get increased in kind of levels of maturity. And we'll be looking at NextThink's take on that, and hopefully we're going to see that we've got some quite good synergy between the context that you've set and the and, if you like, the ability to manage that maturity from the outside in, from the point of view of business consumers back into the IT organization. And the two I's in this case are infrastructure and sentiment, and we'll explain a little bit of what that means as we go through the presentation here. So, and I thought I'd start really just then coming back to what you were saying about needing that visibility. You know, there's been a couple of surveys in the past, and I'll just pull out a couple of scary highlights here. One is perhaps not surprising, but, you know, typically people working with technology are prone to lose time, lose productivity, and, you know, upset the bottom line for organizations due to technology problems. We all know that. That's why SLAs exist. That's why IT management systems exist, to keep the lights on. I think what's more concerning here is that of those issues, even if IT are having things reported back in, you know, in via incident management or event management or ops monitoring or whatever the case may be, it's still a case that users are struggling with things that are, to all intents and purposes, invisible to IT. Often the only way that IT knows that there's an issue is when somebody's phoning the service desk and complaining. And a lot of that is because the focus of IT, historically and traditionally, even the focus of best practice frameworks like ITIL, for example, have tended to focus on the technology that IT can get its arms around. And the further away you get from the data center, the more difficult it is to get a feel for exactly how those technologies are working and how those services are being consumed. And a lot of it comes down to assets. If we think about what we're really managing at a top level, there's a number of key factors. One is we need to make sure that we're doing things, according to the correct budgetary constraints, and so on. So we need to manage budgets, and we need to manage our investment in the IT services that we're delivering. The other key employee, or the other key asset in all organisations really, is the employees. Not only do you have to worry about making sure that they're trained effectively and they're working as good corporate citizens, but especially in these interesting new normal times where people have to maintain a very dynamic approach to where they're working from and so on. We need to make sure that they're working at full capacity and have access to the technology that they need in order to do it. And that is really, if you like, the third plank. And I think if we look at the way IT has been managed historically, a lot of the focus has been on those digital investments, on the data center and the server farms and the software procurements and the agile developments and so on. And most of the service level agreements that are written and most of the monitoring tools and most of the management disciplines in place have had a tendency to focus on that space. And in fact, if you look at how, for example, technology has evolved over the past 30 years by orders of magnitude and massive levels of criticality, and compare that with the processes that we're using to manage, where something like, for example, incident management is really almost unchanged from when it was first introduced 35 years ago. I think the piece of the picture, I guess, that is kind of at the moment getting more focus and people are beginning to realize that there's more value in doing it is this vertical access, where not only do we need to make sure that our technology is singing the right song, we need to make sure that our employees are actually using that technology in a focused way in order to be productive. And I guess the sweet spot really is then being able to have the management tools and the management focus to make sure that we stay in that sweet spot. And that means not only that our SLAs are green, but also that our employees' experience is green as well. And I'm sure everyone's heard of watermelon SLAs by now, where IT looks at the SLA and it's all a beautiful green watermelon and everything seems perfect. When in reality, if you cut into that watermelon and look inside, it's red all the way through to the middle. And that red really represents often the different experience that end users are getting. And that's why so often you get this this kind of unbalanced dialogue where IT is delivering according to an SLA and it still doesn't seem to be delivering what end users are expecting. And bear in mind that it's not a static target. IT is constantly having to deal with change, and that's not just change in technology, in that we need to upgrade something, or we need to manage these various releases of Office 365, or we need to build a new data center, but it's legislative changes, it's changes in product functionality or application functionality, it's changes in the way that the business works, because every business change has to result in IT kind of struggling to catch up. And I guess the term, even the analysts now are starting to talk less about technology management or infrastructure management or even service management. And we're hearing the term employee experience management or digital experience management being introduced more and more. And with that, there is a corresponding set of metrics that you may have heard tell about, which is rather than service level agreements, experience level agreements, you know, ELAs or XLAs, where we're trying to take a much more holistic view on what's going on. And I guess what we're kind of focused on at NextThink is providing that ability to allow you to augment your existing management processes, the traditional IT service management tools, the operational monitoring tools, and so on, and give you an additional perspective, give you that vertical access so that you can really see whether you're hitting the sweet spot. So here, the ability to measure and manage how services are being delivered, but from the end user's perspective. So we're not managing whether a server is up 99% of the time. We're measuring whether an employee can continue to remain productive 99% of the time. We've got the ability here to proactively identify issues which can impact that digital experience score, not only specifically, but also in a very proactive way. So we're not spotting that one person has gone wrong, we're spotting that 1,000 people are at risk, and we can proactively resolve those issues before they manifest themselves as low productivity or incident storms, or however you want to measure them. We're also taking advantage increasingly of machine intelligence so that we can actually make recommendations based on what we're seeing in the infrastructure, issues building up, people reporting complaints, whatever it might be. We can identify those and advise on what the best action is to take based on what has been successful in the past. And we can go one step further. You know, traditionally, orchestration tools and automation tools have been very much focused on either the virtual kind of hybrid or private clouds, or on physical data centers. And we can extend that capability to enable the automation of actions right out to the desktop. So its typical scenario might be, we detect that somebody's downloaded a piece of malware or blacklisted software. We can automatically notify them of that and automatically disconnect them from the network. Or we can see that an application's crashed. We can automatically refresh the profile, decorrupt it, restart the application. And in that particular case, you know, we're talking about moving from half an hour resolution time or having to make appointments to go around and fix something to 10 to 15 seconds to automatically resolve and restart that application. And I think, given this as well, it means that we can take almost a theory of constraint, management science-based approach to this, where we can identify what's on the top of our to-do list for today, what do we need to fix in order to improve the quality of the service. And after that, we can figure out what's next and what's next and what's next. So we can really use a fact-based approach to everything, if you like, in the application lifecycle, from understanding demand from the business, to understanding the performance of our application portfolio, to understanding where do we invest next in order to continue to improve service. And it's not based on guesswork or conversations or incomplete surveys or incomplete data sets. It's based on true, real observation of how the business is consuming IT services right now. And in line with what you were just talking about in terms of the maturity model, Kuldeep, you know, obviously there isn't a magic button that lets you jump almost in a quantum leap to being a super mature organization. So in addition to the, if you like, the platform capabilities, we're able to introduce those technological benefits in a very phased kind of maturity-based roadmap, where we can start very quickly and easily simply by switching on the ability to see what's happening with your end user community. Once we've started to establish a baseline, we've started to understand the patterns and the flows of what's going on, and we've started to build a roadmap of what needs to be improved, we can then start to roll out increasing levels of automation, increasing levels of taking advantage of that insight, which ultimately leads to almost a very agile way of continually benchmarking what's going on, continually layering increasing levels of improvement, both through the tool itself, but also through integration with the Splunks and the ServiceNows and the management tools of the world, in order to allow NextThink to add increasing value as time goes on in the organization. Ultimately, meaning that NextThink really is an eye into how the business is actually consuming IT services and how we can have an ongoing fact-based dialogue with the business to agree on what we should do next and how we should operate. The way that we do that with NextThink is by deploying a cloud-based platform that's 24/7 available. It's hosted by NextThink and managed by NextThink on the customer's behalf. Massive scalability, which means that we've got customers who've got desktop or laptop populations of hundreds of thousands of devices, and we can use NextThink not only to manage all of those devices at an individual technology point of view, but to be able to see the trends and see the flows in the way that technology is working and where it isn't working, in order for us to take a very strategic view of what's going on. And that we've got a number of components that help us to do that. One is for every device that an end user or a business user is using, we're capturing something in the region of 800 separate data points in real time. And it's not just the traditional, this is how much RAM you've got on your device. We're actually watching how services are being consumed. We're making sure that the right versions of application software are being run. We're making sure that they're connecting through the right ports and all of the technical stuff to allow us to actually build up a complete picture of the device and every step along the way to the service that it's consuming. And that doesn't matter whether it's something that's deployed in your own data center or something that's deployed as a SaaS or a cloud-based service. We've got the full visibility of how that end user is actually achieving productivity. Now, in combination with that, we've got the component called Act, which allows us to do automation out to the desktop, either for repair or for update or ongoing additional monitoring. We've got a component called Engage, which really takes the idea of surveys and really moves them an order of magnitude ahead. The traditional email-based surveys that we're using for CSAT and customer survey functions, typically, in my conversations with customers, typically kind of gets about 5% response. And it's typically only the really, really happy or the really, really unhappy people who respond to these things. Using NextThink's kind of unique pop-up capabilities, we're finding that we're getting closer to 60 or 70% response rates. And the beauty is that we can correlate what our end users are telling us in real time with what we're seeing from the devices that they're using. So we've got this real correlated and tight ability to see exactly who's doing what and how they're coping with it. And finally, the integration component allows us to integrate with a whole range of external management and monitoring platforms to give us a complete picture of our infrastructure. And with that, I'll spend a couple of brief minutes now just demonstrating some of these capabilities, and then we'll pop back and have a wrap up and perhaps some questions. So let me quickly go back to here. So point number one, I mentioned that what NextThink can do is basically measure hundreds and hundreds of data points. Now, we don't necessarily want to have to sit there and sift through spreadsheets full of data points. So NextThink does that job for us. Here we can see a top-level digital experience score here, overview page, which is showing us that it's measuring the health of our business applications, of our device population, of our employee satisfaction, and of our productivity and collaboration applications. And it essentially takes all of that and it gives us, as you can see here, our score out of 10. So we can immediately see at the top level, A, looks like something might need a bit of investigation, but B, it's beginning to tell us where we should go next, rather than having to sign up to a daily call or spend hours sifting through service reports. We're actually being shown here a picture of how that service is being delivered right now. And we can see here whether we're improving over time or getting worse over time. And it's a very simple matter then to be able to drill in. We can see that the device performance is the least satisfactory. So we can then ask, well, show me what's going on. And we can see here, based on the surveys that we've mentioned, that we've got a number of people who are frustrated with the level of service that we've got. we can see here that it seems to be our remote workers that are having the most kind of frustration. And as we go down further, we can see here very specifically what are the things that are causing us the biggest issues. And we can see, in fact, in this case, seems to be log-on duration that's causing the problem. Now, another view of this is some specific science that we've put in place to help us with some of these new challenges that we're facing. So we've got some specific, what we call library packs that give us all of the information we need to help us not only transition the workforce to a working from home situation, but also continue monitoring those in an ongoing way. So we can see here we've got our readiness assessment, and we can see here that before we send everyone out the door, we can make sure that people have got the right firewall technologies installed, they've got their VPNs installed properly, that they're compliant, and we can even see here where we need to focus on maybe machines that need to be upgraded before we can allow them to be worked from home. But that's only part of the story, because we need to do more than just see things going on. And with the new experience optimization dashboard, we can see that we've not only got a bird's eye view of that experience number that we've got, but we've then got the ability to start drilling down into what is it that I should be doing either today or this week or this month from a strategic point of view in order to drive myself forwards. And I can very quickly and easily filter this. I can say, only show me the guys who are having a frustrating experience. We can see here that we've been given a filter. We can see here that we've got a breakdown, which can be tuned. So I'm going to come here and say, give me a breakdown by working style. And we can validate here that our remote workers are the guys who've got the most frustration. But that's not where we stop. If we look at the right-hand side here, we've got another view of those 115 devices where we've actually used the kind of the analytics and the machine intelligence to tell us exactly what it is that's causing the biggest, squeakiest wheel in our IT factory. And in this particular case, end users working from home are having problems, perhaps because they've got slower bandwidth working from home. The login duration has become unacceptable. Now, at this point, traditionally, I'd have to start doing some unscientific planning and figuring out what's going on with incomplete information. What NextThink can tell us is, or what it can give us, is a whole set of options where I can drill into that data that we're collecting in real time and either continue to do further investigation or even start to do automation in order to solve that problem. So in this particular case, I've got here the ability by simply clicking a link here, providing I've got the appropriate roles and management authority, I can click a link and that is going to go out and right now and automatically go and refactor or tune the startup list for Windows app, for those 64 affected Windows machines. And that's just one example of the kind of benefits that we can get from this. We can see here, for example, that it may be a disk space issue, or it may be that we're suffering crashes on Teams and we've got our critical Friday meetings coming up. So we can come in here and again, take a number of steps in terms of troubleshooting the Teams stack, using that forensic data from NextThink to go and focus in exactly on what the issue is. And then based on what we learn, fixing that issue proactively for that Teams community. Another kind of approach here is that you know, we've actually got the ability to see how effectively services are being consumed in real time. So I can have a dashboard here, if I can get there, that actually shows me what's happening in the real world. So we can see here that our ERP service is suffering from some issues. I can very quickly and easily go into the next level of detail and be shown a high-level picture, not only of how that service is operating over a timeline, but I can even then be shown a list of the people who are suffering. I can drill in more deeply to see exactly what's causing that suffering. And more proactively, I can say, show me everybody else who might have a problem, because 7 people may have crashed. There may be 1,000 people out there, a major incident just waiting to happen. Now, the first thing I need to do is stakeholder notification. So I can then very quickly, without relying on emails that get deleted, without relying on phone calls that go to voicemail, I can send a proactive targeted message only to those people who are running that crashing version of SAP, I can send them a notification. And in fact, I can use this exact same pop-up technology to drive surveys, customer satisfaction surveys, and so on. And very briefly, the final piece we'll look at here is the ability for NextThink to provide data into your existing management platforms. And just one very simple example here. I'm John Smith. I'm an end user. I'm a customer, if you like. And I've got a problem with the slow PC. Now, rather than having to phone the service desk and wait for 20 minutes, I can come to the chatbot. It doesn't have to be the ServiceNow virtual agent. It can be pretty much any chatbot technology you've got. It's asking for some validation of exactly what it is. I'm saying, well, my PC seems to be wheezing a bit. Tell me what my PC health is. And we can see here that NextThink is not just going back to an old spreadsheet or an out-of-date CMDB. It's gone to that real-time NextThink data that we've collected, and it's done a health check on the performance, the behavior, the compliance, and the health of that device, and it's highlighted exactly where my issues might be. And in this case, we've spotted that we're running out of space. But more than that, we can actually drive automation just by clicking yes. I've opened a ticket to document it, but I'm now actually driving an action to this guy's device in order to click on his temp files and recycle bin and so on. And out of the box, we provide well over 100 predefined scenarios for automation and various kinds of remote action. There are additionally, the ability to manage, to automatically manage tickets. So if I'm a desk agent, I can simply pop in the name of a device, or even base it on the end user's name. And within a couple of seconds, we can see here we've got a series of tabs that are popping up that are highlighting for me exactly what the issue is. Now, just in that 2 clicks, I've saved probably 20 minutes conversation on the phone, and I've got far better information for the logging, for the classification, for the diagnosis, and with the links here, even for the remediation or the resolution of that ticket. So you can see here that NextThink, working with an existing management platform, can augment it enormously and give you the data that you need to drive those maturity levels up. And with that, I'll hand back to Kuldeep to run the wrap up.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Just gonna reshare my screen and just get back to the wrap-up slide. Can everybody see my screen? Should be able to. What do you see?
I can see, yep, I can see you're going through the slides there, yeah.
Oh, back a bit, right.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you for that, David. Just a kind of quick wrap up because we can get into Q&A. Some of the key takeaways from this webinar is I just wanted to kind of refocus the fact that, it's a good time for IT to, build on the momentum that they have and the goodwill that they've kind of engendered through going through digital workplace and remote working. I think the IT function must transform because of the pressures they're going to face from a spend perspective, and bringing effectiveness and efficiency is really important, and being the business partner and integrator. You can use the IT maturity model to benchmark where you are as an organization, an IT department, and think about how that can aid you on the IT transformation journey to support the digital journey that the business is embarking on. There's always a need to focus on the people side of change, and what I tried to show you was the traditional S-curve and how you need to develop your change network to drive that adoption across stakeholder groups. The S-curve for the normal distribution is the cumulative distribution for change adoption, and getting that focus early on the innovators and the champions is really key, and then bringing on the naysayers maybe in the future, whilst you still need to make some actions around that. I think hopefully you've seen the power of the NextThink product as a tool that can aid not only looking at your IT infrastructure, your systems, your devices, and all the services that you provide to your end users, but it can proactively monitor your environment and bring in sentimental people, end user responses, and use that data to effectively to do proactive problem management, and support the IT transformation in moving the IT function from that basic reactive department to becoming that proactive IT function with the business agility and aligned to the business needs, and reducing the need. It's all about supporting self-service and learning and sharing knowledge so that users can tackle those issues quicker, faster, better. I think David has quite clearly articulated it's not just about infrastructure-based metrics. We now need to really augment our insights around supporting IT productivity from a consumer perspective. And the new norm is not just about working from home. It's about being ready and being agile and being resilient for the future, because there are many, many forces still to come, be it financial, be it wave 2, COVID-20, whatever we need to become resilient. And I think IT needs to continue to move on that transformation journey, driving business outcomes, business partnering, and bringing around that cultural change. With that, I'm going to just stop. I think we've finished our slides and wanted to very much open it up to the audience to ask questions. I am going to allow people to, I'm going to unmute everybody. So if there's a question that anybody wants to ask me, myself or David, we would really appreciate that and try to answer your queries.
May I start?
Yes, Peter.
Kuldeep, a lot of what you showed originally is correct, valid. I recognized it. It's not something new. It very much brought me back to the late 80s, early 90s when I was working with the Software Engineering Institute in Pittsburgh. What makes you think that today people are going to start listening? We've been repeating this stuff now for 40 years, and we still seem to be repeating the same thing without getting the motivation on board from senior management.
Yeah, two or three things there, Peter. One, I do think there's some new stuff here, and the new stuff is that the traditional transformation programs that I certainly worked on earlier were all based around this big bang, and where I've got this. I am the owner of the transformation agenda. I'm going to radically transform your world, setting high expectations, and that in some cases probably worked, but in many cases hasn't worked. What I'm advocating here, sorry, Peter, is that we need to do things in a more agile, incremental way, because you need to take people on the journey. So that's one part of your question. The second part is that we need people like yourself and me and others to be championing and constantly ensuring that leaders understand there's better ways of transforming and bringing change into an organization. So, this is where people need to be banging on the doors, saying, look, there's better ways of doing it. And, change has to come from the top down. My experiences of people coming together in groups at a low level, yes, can bring some level of change, but you do absolutely, and I do agree, it needs that top-down sponsorship to really motivate, support, build a culture of and a safe culture for change to happen. So there's not a magic bullet around it, but I think I particularly focus on when I talk about agile, I'm talking about things like a DevOps kind of movement, where there's a real culture around embracing learning in a safe way, not focusing on timelines, but focusing on outcomes. And those kind of those kind of projects have really shown real business value and measured through KPIs. So I think there's a need for people to champion those projects and be the educators of the C-suite in so many cases.
I would like to continue this discussion, but I see time is running out, and I'm sure other people have questions.
Yes.
Just wanted to add in that I was telling people in the mid-90s, early 90s, that in your improvement program, you need to roll out real value to the end users on average once a month, so that there is this continuous seeing something of value coming. And
Absolutely.
if you've got nothing, if you've got a big one coming out, postpone something so that you can wait a month before releasing it, even though it's ready.
Absolutely agree. And I think
I'll be quiet now.
I just want to, one final point. You've seen the waterfall world, right? It didn't work. It hasn't worked, and we need to do better ways of delivering value through software development, product development. Let me.
So I'll just
happy to. Yeah, go ahead.
Add a comment there. It was a really good point, Peter. That I think you're absolutely right. That we've been looking for answers to this kind of eternal promise for 30 or 40 years. And in fact, I'm just looking at a slide that I use in my standard deck with some comments by the IT skeptic, by one of the ITIL community, where he was saying, 15 years ago, the most important monitoring tools are those that measure end user experience. But I think he was shouting in the dark in a way. I think the trouble is IT culture, and if you think about the way that kind of best practice frameworks are designed, they tend to focus on managing the technology, and in a lot of ways, sorry about the beeps in the back there. In a lot of ways, the end users are almost like the elephant in the room. And I think we're beginning to see some change now. ITIL4 now talks about more about business value and about value streams and about engaging with the user community. But I think there's so long been a culture of thinking that if you keep the technology nice and shiny, then the problem's gone away. And the perspective of end users has been disregarded. And I think that's been the missing link, if you like. That's been the jigsaw puzzle piece that we're now beginning to realize is probably the critical one.
I think the perspective of end users has been repeated many times, but it's very quickly changed into a technology. Even when you see Agile, they've completely lost the principles of Agile to replace it by tool selling.
Yeah, it's about sentiment as well as technology. I think you're absolutely
right. And I think, as you know, David and Peter, transformation is a people thing. The challenge is always on the people side, right? The technology and the processes can be tackled. It's really about getting people bought in to the vision, to the direction, and then showing that value not only to the end users but to business stakeholders to keep that momentum going. Lisa has a question, David. I think probably more for you than me.
Okay.
It says, assume that any engagement of the Nextlim platform can be done by engaging with iOS via YouTube.
Could we possibly get a clarification of the question there?
Yeah. Lisa, are you there? I hope you.
So just to clarify, while we're there, so the current platform is focused on the kind of desktop and laptop technologies. So it's Windows and Mac OS. We have some additional capabilities around mobile devices, but realistically, either those technologies are very locked down as operating systems, or they have some kind of very specific and very bespoke management platforms of their own. I mean, that's a roadmap discussion I'd be very happy to have. But the main value that customers get from the Nextlim platform is through the kind of Windows and Mac OS kind of platforms.
I was
Okay.
thinking in case of entities or groups, whatever businesses or organisations that are interested in it. Because I've just had a look on Twitter. Is this the same entity next thing that's based in Switzerland?
That's correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Based in
is it an offering that you can roll out as a service and tool for anyone who wants to engage with it as an offering?
Absolutely. So we've got customers ranging from banks to public sector to manufacturing organisations, retail, pretty much anyone who's using kind of common technologies, and that's not limited to a desktop PC. It could be kiosks, it could be railway, it could be check-in counters or check-in booths at airports. Pretty much anything that runs that technology that is business critical gives us, we've got that ability to really kind of get on the other side of it and see how it's working from the business's point of view.
It looked like a very smart piece of kit. I was really impressed by how you demonstrated the benefits that can be done with it, the fixing, the ease, that chat facility. They're very smart.
Yeah, I think one of the sort of challenges with a lot of kind of tools that manage complex environments is often that you need to spend weeks teaching them what to do. And I think one of the differentiators really from our point of view is that you can install it, and obviously you can teach it more and more over time, but it can start to gather stuff and highlight stuff almost instantly. So we had an insurance company customer who like 2 days after installing it, just from a proof of value point of view, without even having any training or any kind of demos of how they should use it, had discovered the cause of a problem that had been bedeviling them for like several weeks beforehand.
Wow, impressive.
Just by switching it on. So yeah, it's powerful stuff.
Yeah, it looked really cool. I've worked on very different stuff, but always love digital tools that you can drill down to see the data. And the fact that this one can actually help fix things, and that extra chat, I thought was a really good idea.
Yeah, it's powerful. And I think, as Peter was saying earlier on, I mean, one of the key things is that it's one thing to monitor technology, but the fact that we can correlate that with what people are actually thinking and feeling means that it's not only useful for day-to-day operational issues, we can start to feed into portfolio management and the things like demand management and the continual improvement cycle. So it's a real, from that point of view, that's where the real power comes from a maturity perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A great question, Lisa. Anybody else? I think we'll take one more question if we have, because I know that we've run over time, but I do appreciate everybody staying on. If there's one more question, we'll take that. Otherwise, we might bring it to a close. Anybody else? No? Jonathan?
Okay.
No?
Thank you. It was interesting. It's always useful.
Okay. If there's no more questions, I will bring the session to a close. And just again to thank you for your precious time. I know it's quite warm out there. Enjoy your evening or your day, wherever you might be. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Yep.